All right. I am live now. Gonna see if this is working right. It's much better. All right. Twin seal. Yeah, my audio was wrong before. All right. Kind of a kind of an oversight. If I don't make double sure the audio is right when I first start, then it is then it's like you can't change it. Hello, Nani. Yeah, what an oversight. I have to be double careful of that next time because I just literally didn't click the right mic. It was trying to gather the audio from my camera instead of like this mic, which is why I sounded all echoey and bad. And I could not change it once in the stream, which is so wild. But I'm glad people are finding their way in here. Heck yeah, much better. All right. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm gonna give it just a minute for people to filter back in. My apologies for the delay. Big learning moment there. Figured out that I have to be super careful about making sure to click the correct mic when we get started. All right. I think, let me just share this real quick. Share this in the in the community tab. All right. Okay. It's gone about as wrong as it can go. It's fine. It's fine. All right. Make sure this is the right thing. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to go for it. Welcome, everybody. We've got Twin Steel in here. Hello, Twin Steel. We've got Nani. Hello. How are you doing? We've got Sketchosaur Rex. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Great to see you awesome people in here. We are going to talk about the Hexblade Patron. Now, the question originally was how to run the Hexblade Patron. And there are a couple different things to take into account for this. And I'm kind of wanting to get everybody's insight for this. I would love to hear what people have to say about this. Basically, the Hexblade Patron, and let me just bring up okay, I'm reading from actually CBR.com for this because from how I understand it, this is actually in Tasha's, like the Book of Hideous Laughter. And as surprising as it might be, I don't actually own that book. Like a lot of my players own that book, but I do not own a copy of that book. And I realized that there's probably more information in that book and less in the Player's Handbook than I thought there was. However, the Warlock subclass is generally defined by the patron they are contracted to serve in exchange for their power. The Hexblade Warlock's patron exists somewhere in the Shadowfell, and it is from that place the powerful shadow weapons they wield in combat are shaped. Pact of the Hexblade Warlocks are a popular specialization, but at times the build feels like it's lacking. They have access to several powerful spells, but their casting remains limited. Twin Steel says, I've seen an angry sword and a devil before. So have I. So have I. All right. So basically, the question here is, how would you run a Hexblade Patron? Okay, this is the question. They're from the Shadowfell. What is the Shadowfell? And I'm gonna actually read a little something here. The Shadowfell is a grim and melancholic realm within the D&D cosmos. It is the dark echo of the material plane, and I see it as kind of like being like the upside down, right? Where the sun never truly shines and the land itself moans with melancholy. The Shadowfell is a dimension of dead magic, chilling shades, and endless gloom, cast in perpetual dusky twilight. The Shadowfell contains the information a dungeon master needs to run adventures set in the plane known as the Shadowfell, with details on locations such as the Darkreach Mountains, Dead Man's Cross, and the House of Black Lanterns, Gloom Rot, Letherna, the Oblivion Bog, and Thyring Gall. In D&D 5e, the Shadowfell is a desolate, dark plane of existence full of horrors. So this is kind of what we're dealing with, and creating a patron that exists in the Shadowfell is the goal here. Now, let me talk for just a minute about D&D patrons. D&D patrons, well, warlock patrons. D&D patrons for warlocks. This to me is a super, super fun, like a super fun thing. I think that, how can I explain this? I see warlock patrons as being different than like the gods for clerics and paladins, in the sense that like their patrons are not necessarily at god level. They're just really powerful creatures, really powerful beings, some kind of powerful entity. Okay. This is a different dynamic, is a different relationship. Sketchosaur Rex says a shadow dancer assassin build from that description. Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. It's a different relationship than like a worshiper and a god. A god is a god. And in fact, in my world state, in my in my homebrew world state, there's like a realm of gods where the gods live. And that's a very specific place, is a very specific tier of existence. And that's different from what warlock patrons do. Warlock patrons are beings that exist either in like Shadowfell is an example. They may live in some other realm, but they do not live in the realm of gods. Okay. Jason 96. What is this? This is a live stream talking about the Hexblade Paladin, or I'm sorry, the Hexblade Warlock, running a Hexblade Warlock, but more specifically, how to GM the patron of a Hexblade Warlock. And my apologies, my live stream got all messed up. I did it wrong. And so my thumbnail's gone and my title's gone. I thought that I could end it and restart it, and I could not. This is only my second live stream. So forgive me for the technical glitches, but it'll be the first of many. So I see it as a minimal waste, but that's okay. Classic multi-class. It is. Okay. So here's the thing though, is that this relationship between the PC and this patron is slightly different than relationship between like a cleric and their deity. I'm always interested in a patron type discussion. Heck yeah. Sorry I'm late. Happy to be here. Hey, Dank Monkey, I'm glad you made it in. I had technical difficulties. As you could see, my original stream just got it got messed up by a technical error by me. I did not click the proper microphone before I came in, and then it was all a wash. But that's okay. Now I know better. Next time I will make double, triple sure to check the appropriate microphone before I start the live stream, lest we be drowning in a pool of echoes of my voice that sound like I'm in a large empty cavern. With that being said, we're talking about how to run a good patron for Warlock Hexblade. Okay. I love the patron Warlock relationship, because the thing about a patron, I think that makes it different than a god, is that a god already is a god. They have godlike power. They're at the top of the food chain. There might be beings that exist above the gods, but if they are, they're not beings the mortals are usually aware of, and they're usually beings that the gods don't share about a lot. Now, with that being said, when it comes to the warlock patron relationship, I love to think of the patron as someone who wants power. Question by Jason96. As a DM, how much do you use a warlock's patron in your games? My answer is very often, very often. In fact, in my current game, I have a player playing a warlock. They chose the old great one, but they said specifically they want their patron. They didn't want to know who their patron was. They wanted it to be a little bit of a mystery. And part of the reason for this is because they said that they found an old book, like an old cryptic book, and studied it. And it was like an old manuscript written by some great power. And they believed in it. And when they started to believe in it, they started to commune in almost like an anonymous magical sense with this patron. And they came to accept this patron as their patron, and they were given the warlock abilities. But they still did not know who their patron was specifically. And what it turned out was that in my homebrew world, there is a whole pantheon of gods for each continent. Each continent is governed by a different pantheon of gods, and the strongest on that continent. And on this continent, there was a pantheon of gods. And one of those gods was the god of evil named Malixus. And what it turned out was our warlock had entered into a contract with a fallen angel of Malixus, one of Malixus's celestial servants, who basically was a chaotic, kind of represented the chaotic evil bent of Malixus's ruling. But this angel had rubbed Malixus the wrong way, was too chaotic, was pushing a little too much, was even trying to create their own power outside of Malixus's rule. And so Malixus banished this angel to a prison world. And basically this prison world looks like the surface of Mars. It's got red rock and dust, and it's just a barren wasteland. And this fallen angel's trapped there. This angel's name was Zerachiel. And Zerachiel had been reaching out to the material plane, trying to get someone to help them. So your patrons are not gods, but some other powerful entity like fallen angel. Yeah, Jason96, 100%. I never treat so I shouldn't say that gods are never patrons. It's just not the way I run it. It's not commonplace. Now, ironically, I actually do have a warlock in my games right now who is following a god as a patron, but that is a somewhat rare case in my games. Generally speaking, patrons are not gods. Very specifically, they are beings who are trying to ascend to godhood, generally speaking, in my games. Twin Steel says, I agree and like to incorporate patrons into the plot too. I had a player roll a celestial patron. It turned out to be a unicorn, and the birth of her baby was the impetus of the whole plot. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. So one of the things that I really like about the patron warlock relationship is that it can be more there's a lot of reasons to make it more intimate. So for example, a god has many followers. They're going to have, if it's a mainstream god, they might have hundreds, thousands of clerics, hundreds of thousands, maybe even hundreds, maybe even millions of followers who devoutly follow them. But the thing about the patron and the warlock is that the patron probably doesn't have that many people actually following them, because they're like a very niche figure in the plot of the world. And so what you'll have is a situation where they have this follower, and they're going to invest a lot more into that follower than a god would. So you end up with this really intimate, or at least much more intimate relationship. That's anyway the way I run it. Nani777 says, fallen angel of an evil god is so sick. Perfect patron material. Hexblade could work for that. I totally agree. The only thing would have been, if it was going to be a Hexblade, then they would have had to be in the Shadowfell. That's the only thing that might have been different, but that's okay. They could have been banished to Shadowfell for all it matters, because that's kind of that seems to be a thing with the Hexblade, is that they worship or they commune with a patron from the Shadowfell. Dink Money says, a warlock in my campaign is pledged to Vramcool the Bone Lord. Oh, that's so sick. I love that. In the Shadowfell, he has tasked the warlock with finding specific magical items in exchange for his spells. Eventually, Vramcool will wage war with the Raven Queen in a power grab, pumped for when that comes to fruition. Yeah. So this is what it's all about, I feel like. I feel like with a patron, it's always like they have a lust for power. And the warlock is a tool that they're using in their struggle for power. So the warlock gets these amazing abilities, and they also get this bigger relationship with the patron, I feel like, than like clerics or paladins get with their gods. Jason 96 says, I've struggled with warlock patrons, by the way, but the way you do it makes sense. Well, thank you very much. And it is a struggle, but so even in the first, so this is the way I run patrons. Patrons are like, it's almost like, it's not like a possession, but it's like, it's almost like be very careful, right? So like in the very first scene of my campaign that I'm running right now, the warlock was in the bottom of a ship with the other party members. They were like immigrants running for their lives from this fallen kingdom that they were fighting to defend. They're just like refugees now. But the warlock, like, she was sitting there, and then the other players had to roll perception check and realize there was this strange shadow being cast from her. And then the boards were creaking, and the shadow was standing tall, and there seemed to be this image over the shadow's head. And the symbol for this patron was like a broken halo. It was like an imperfect halo, a halo with a portion that was broken out of it. And then the shadow just rescinded into the shadow, the natural shadow being cast by the warlock herself. And it was just a little bitty thematic thing. This warlock likes to try to, or the warlock's patron likes to try to manipulate the world through this warlock's presence, because that's his only way to do it. He is literally locked in a prison world, so he must act through his warlocks, and that's his only way. And his ultimate goal was to get out of the prison world and into the material plane so he could run rampant and run wild. And so he was like leading this warlock on basically a quest to like get these powerful wizards to open a portal that would allow him to come through. That was kind of his big plot. Jason 96, Twin Steel says, the most recent warlock I DM'd was dedicated to a homebrew patron, a fungal lord named It That Sows and Reaps. That's so odd, so metal. It was a sentient mycelial network that treated the city it grew through as a farm. Dink Money says, that's dope. That is very dope. I love it so much. So anyway, now, the question of how to run the patron, and I would like everyone to give me your thoughts on this. I feel like the best way I like to run a patron, they're like the devil on your shoulder, generally speaking. So here's the thing about a patron. Generally, even if they're not evil, they're not good. Like generally speaking, it's like a dark figure. At the very least, it's like a neutral figure that has some kind of aim and goal. Very rarely is it good. And I feel that there's good reason for this. Not that it couldn't be. Generally, when I have players playing warlocks, they do not request a good patron, or they don't try to like set it up that way. And I agree with this because someone who's trying to get other people to wield power for them and then to accomplish things in like the material plane for them, like they're going to have these like schemes and plans. This does not seem like the way that a good, or like when I say good, I mean like an alignment, like a neutral good or lawful good. I mean, they might do that kind of thing, but I feel like it's way more rare. So we usually have a dark, sort of malevolent, maybe mischievous. At the very least, we have like a cynical, hungry for power figure using the warlock, maybe manipulating the warlock, maybe treating the warlock like a pawn. At the best, treating them like a partner in a larger scheme, right? So that's kind of the way I like to run it. Nani777 says, they're selfish and ambitious. Good entities don't take souls as payment. That is See, that is actually exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Dank Money says, I imagine them with a likeness of Rumpelstiltskin from Once Upon a Time series, and trickery ways are perfect for Patron. I would agree. Actually, it's a very good, that's a very good, I feel like, comparison. Twin Seal says, yeah, even the Celestial Unicorn Patron is in one of my campaigns was good, but in a Fae way that brutally prioritized nature over civilization. Yeah, and that makes sense too, because the Fae actually can be powerful patrons, but like good, good for the Fae isn't always good for everyone else, which is why I love Fae so much. But anyway, but I digress. The point being, though, is that so we have this nature of this relationship with this patron, and it's like it's sort of a dark relationship, right? So it's like there's always this pressure, and this is what I love about running the patron. I love running the patron warlock relationship. Is like the patron starts out being like, oh, join my cause. You get power. like you can wield you'll get Eldritch Blast, right? You're going to get these powers. You get to, do these things. It's like very good. Oh, cool. And then like a little while into it, it's like, oh, will you do this thing for me? Just I need you to get this crystal from that person. And it's like, oh, well, how am I supposed to do that? You can do it. The way you do it doesn't matter. Just get it. Right. It's like it starts to get darker, and then it just gets more and more dark. That's how I like to run it, because a patron, with the way they usually run it, is they recruit, and they show their like best face, the one that'll be most universally accepted. And then, so let's say they recruit some warlocks, and then they start to get more real. They're like, okay, here's the real deal. This is what we're doing. And then what ends up happening is maybe some of the warlocks are like, no, screw this, I'm out. And maybe they bounce, and the real ones stay. Jason 96's question. So the patron comes to the warlock in a dream or something. So that's a good question. And I leave that up to the backstory. And I always talk to the player about that. I'm like, how did you meet your patron? How did it come to be? If they want me to write it, I'll write it for them. But like the example in my most recent campaign, the one I'm running right now, the warlock basically, so she has sage background. She was studying possibly to be a wizard, but that was a lot of school. Like that was actually, her thing was like, that was a lot of schooling. I don't know if I really want to go through all that. But I like to go to the library. I like to read. She found this cryptic old magical book. And it's literally called the Dark Manuscript. Like that's the name we gave it. And I actually printed out a bunch of passages from it, but she actually read this book, and it seemed to open her mind to commune with this being from this prison world. And that was why the book was actually planted in the material plane. Zerachiel wrote that book and put it in the material plane in such a way that when people would read it, their eyes would be opened and they would realize the truth of Zerachiel. Like they would realize his truth that he's fighting for. And people who agreed with him enough, they would have this opening of their mind to the telepathic communication. And at first it might come in the form of dreams, but then it would come about in the form of like, they would hear voices, and eventually they would literally be pulled into like very graphic visions where they're standing before him on his prison world. And it would take, a wisdom save to even be able to resist it once they start down the road. Because when they start like the little dreams and stuff, they might put the book aside, but they might keep reading it. And the more they read it, the more they're open to his influence. That's the way that it worked in this campaign. The warlock playing in my current campaign, that's how she ran it. But there's many ways to do it. You could totally have it be through dreams. You could have it be they found a grave, they found an artifact. There's many ways to do it. But anyway, so the patron's going to apply the pressure. They're going to start to put the pressure on. Now, my characters are at level 6 right now. And at this point, like this patron has gone very hard in trying to push this warlock to do things. For example, around level 4, the patron Zerachiel gave her this gem. It's basically a blood gem, like a soul storing gem. It's not exactly known exactly how it functions. I call it a blood gem because it seems to have something to do with blood. It's unknown to the players exactly how it functions. However, Basically what happened was the Zeracul started to give the warlock instructions, and they gave her instructions for how to create this big summoning circle. Like, not summoning circle is a strange word. It's not a complete summoning, but it would like bring his presence into it. So at least he could have like a dip a toe into it. And then she was asked to sacrifice mortals in the circle, and it would fuel him with power. He's like storing up power to try to come to the mortal realm, but she would also get some of the power, and it would infuse this gem because she was given like an artifact by the patron, and it would infuse this artifact, and she could, it took 2 sacrifices of mortal beings to fill the gem, and then she could like what's called crack it. She could like break it and release the power, and then for 10 minutes her and anyone within a certain distance who she designated as an ally would get advantage on certain types of rolls, like attack rolls and saves and so on. So he would like give them this huge boost of power, but then to refuel it, she had to do these sacrifices. But every time she made these sacrifices, most of the power would go to him. And so it became this like very dark relationship where she got in a lot of trouble, because obviously in most cultures, sacrificing mortals would be against the law. It is not, it's murder, right? So this became a very dark thing. She ended up actually leaving this patron, bouncing on him, and he kind of let her go in a disappointed but graceful way. But she ended up actually leaving because it was coming to a point where she was pretty sure she was facing some of her own, like this relationship was going to destroy her, or at the very least, it was going to alienate her from her party, and it was going to kind of isolate her and make her be alone unless she could find other very, very dark people. And the people who were into this kind of thing were not people she wanted to hang out with, like in game. So that's kind of the way the story went. Twin Steel has made a couple comments here. I had a similar thing with an NPC. The party hired a professor to research the BBG, and off screen, he found an eldritch tome about him. Prof changed into a great old one warlock and opened a gate to limbo in his town with help of his players. Yes, this makes sense. This checks out. Jason96 says, so the Hexblade's patron might use the warlock's blade as a conduit to communicate with the warlock. That is very possible. What I would say more like the blade is like, I would say more like the blade is a result of the communion, but how would you commune with the with Shadowfell? Okay, so the Shadowfell is it's basically another realm, and the patron will exist there. So what's going on? The way that it seems to me, the most common sense way for it, literally specifically a Shadowfell thing, is through ghosts. You encounter ghosts. What are they? They're perhaps a deceased soul whose soul lives in the Shadowfell. Maybe they're stuck there. But there's a little bitty bit of them that's walking around them in the material plane looking for help. You start talking to the wrong ghost. They say, please help me. I could give you things. Okay. And then before you know it, you realize the soul's being held hostage by the patron in the Shadowfell, whoever that is, right? And then you realize that these ghosts are basically, they're unbeknownst to them, they are recruiters for this scheme of the warlock. And it starts so innocent. You just talking to a ghost. And then before you know it, you're standing before some kind of great entity offering you power in exchange for your service, right? So to me, that would be probably how I would do a Shadowfell patron, like a Hexblade type thing. And then you get awesome ghostly swords. Twin Steel says they realized too late when they were helping to do in a massive ship full of Slade flooded the city. Didn't go well. Slade, I had a whole like quarter of a campaign that were based on Slade. It was wild. Twin Steel says, Jason96, heck yeah. Naney777 says patrons giving boons to control their warlocks. Got to go off book for that. Feels more special. You do have to go off book a little bit. I don't think that's in the book. It's just like stuff that I put in there because I think that that's such a fun relationship. Twin Steel says, like the idea of a ghost showing up to pass a note from the patron. Yeah, no, I totally like that too. Especially if it's like a little, so you get a little child ghost who's like, please help me. I'm stuck. I have to escape. And it starts as this innocent thing. Turns out there's some gnarly creature in the Shadowfell holding the soul hostage. And if you want the little child to go free, you got to stand before and like negotiate it or fight them, which is probably not going to go well. But more likely they're going to offer you, oh, serve me. You also get awesome blades. You get all these abilities, and I'll let the little child go. You'll accomplish your goal and we can work together, right? That's how I feel like patrons operate. It's kind of how they operate because here's the thing, they need representatives in the mortal world. Why? That's a good question. That to me, this seems implicit in the warlock's whole plight. It seems implicit in the sense that, like, why would the patron care about mortals if they didn't need mortals? They need them for some reason. For some, it might be vanity, but in my thinking, what usually is going on is I'm building into the story some reason for why the patron needs mortals in the mortal world, in the material world, to do things for them. Probably it's because they're banned, because they're so terrible. They're probably banned. The gods don't want them here. That's how I feel like it probably goes, generally speaking. Twin Steel says, it's a win-win, son. Just sign right here. Yeah, 100%. It's a win-win. It's always a win-win. You get awesome blades and you get to do what I say, and you get to be super powerful and no one can mess with you because I am here to help you win. I'm here to help you win. So anyway, I feel like that pretty much gives my rendition of like how I would run a Hexblade patron, and kind of how I think about patrons in general. I think that it's just important and this is going to be my final bit for this. I think that it's really important that when you're running a patron, you think about this. Why does this patron need this mortal? There's a reason for it. Generally, it's a bad reason. Like Zerachiel in my campaign was literally banished from the realm of gods for just he was too radical for the god of evil, because even the god of evil knew you have to operate in a balance. You have to keep balance with the good god, with the gods of law, with the gods of order, with the god of chaos. Even there has to be a balance. Even a very evil god understands that without balance, things are going to get whack. So Zerachiel was so extreme that this god was like, this is not going to work, my son. Banished. So he's literally locked out of everything. He's literally, without some kind of outside power source, he cannot escape the prison world. He needs mortals. The Celestials aren't going to help him. The Fae are not going to help him. Who's going to help him? He needs mortals to help him. So this is why the patron is like a special relationship. So the first question I'm always asking is, why does this person want to mess around with mortals? Like, why would they do this? And to me, I answer that question first, and that lays the groundwork for a really cool patron warlock relationship that's actually relatively intimate, in the sense that, like, when you pray as a cleric, you pray and you might feel good about it. Your God, but you can cast a spell to get a response from your God, but unless you're a very high level cleric, you're probably not going to get crazy big responses from your God, right? But with a warlock, it's different. You're like twice, maybe 4 times as likely to get a conversation with your patron as you are a cleric with their god. Why? Because the warlock values you so much higher and needs you so much more than the god does the cleric. The god is more mainstream. They have more legitimacy. They have more power. So the cleric has cleric abilities. For the warlock, it's more of a different thing. It's like it's just kind of it's like, you want to become a god or something. I want to be powerful. I want to have ghostly swords and I want to win battles. We can help each other. I can get things for you in the material world that you're not allowed to touch. So to me, this is what makes the essence of the patron and warlock relationship so special and so cool. Twin Steel says it's like jumping on a live with different sized creators. Yeah, it kind of is. It's kind of like that. Different sized meaning like, some of them have the power of life and death, and you just hope you don't sign a contract with one who's gonna end you if you disobey, I guess. Nani777 says intimate is a good word for it. The warlock feels more important to the patron than a cleric would be to a god. I agree. I think that is true, and all the bad that comes with it. And I'm not going to lie, I always feel like a patron would have, how can I say this? They're going to have an extra dose of probably like narcissism or something, right? They're going to be a little bit off. A god might be more of like a balanced, all-knowing being, but a warlock is just like power hungry, will stop at nothing. They have a lot to lose, but they have more to gain. And I feel like there's a dose of narcissism that comes with that. So I always run patrons with just this narcissistic bent. And I feel like that makes them way more believable and kind of scary. And also it makes them like legitimately darker. Like I feel like, anyway, that's kind of a thing that I also do. All right. Does anyone have any additional thoughts, any additional tips, any advice for the question that will help people to run a great Hexblade patron for their warlock? Twin Steel says, I like the last live a lot, but I also like how this one's a little more personal. I think that's probably because of the restart. Sorry that happened, but there's a little bit of a silver lining. Yeah, no, totally. So I am actually high key upset that I made that mistake. It's so wild. I feel like that I couldn't go in and like change my microphone to just make it right. But the silver lining is that for me, like what I was thinking, like, oh, this could be very frustrating, but this is just one of like probably hundreds of lives I'm going to do. So it doesn't really matter. And I'm just super happy that people have shown up and that like those of you who are in here found your way here. And so I'm super happy about that. And so totally a win, ended up being a super win. So I really appreciate the positivity there because I was a little down about that. But hey, it's a learning experience. I will do better next time. And the audio is just so important. It can't be sounding like I'm in a cave echoing, you know what I'm saying? Twin Steel says, you're right, man. Just one of many to come. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, that's going to wrap this up. If anyone has any advice, any additional input on how to run a Hexblade patron for your players, please put it in the chat. I'm going to stick around for another couple minutes just to read that off if you do, and also because I want to see it and I want to hear it because I love it. The Warlock is one of my favorite classes. When one of my players says, I'm going to run a Warlock, I just think, oh, yes, I get to role play a patron in this one. Like, I love it so much. I've also role played a great old one, like an Aboleth, and that was so much fun. That was a while ago. Like that was back in a longer campaign I did a couple of years ago, but that was so much fun. I got to role play like literally an Aboleth, like dealing with it wasn't a warlock, but an artificer had made a deal with an Aboleth. And so it wasn't an actual warlock relationship, but there was a relationship. And so that was super fun. Jason96 says, I'm like that with clerics and paladins. I like involving the gods. Yeah, no, absolutely. I do too. I love that so much as well. And especially at higher levels. So I feel like I make my clerics and paladins work really hard to get the gods' attention before like 7th, 8th level. After that, it gets a lot easier. They start to stand out. They start to be more exceptional, and the gods pay more attention to them. But I feel like that happens with warlocks around level like 3 when they get their subclass. That's kind of how I feel about it. Nani777 says the Shadowfell connection makes the Hexblade specifically bleak or dreary. Lean into the edgy. That's really good advice. I would agree. I think that is true. And I think that that's probably going to mirror the sentiments of the patron, and that will probably bleed over into the warlock. I really feel like that's true. So good advice. Very good advice there. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap this one up. Listen, I have a little announcement Next week, I know I said it was going to be this week, but we're putting the finishing touches on it. But next week, the Discord is going live, and I'm going to share next week. I'm going to share the sign up link for the Discord. It's going to be awesome, going to be free, going to be really awesome for like, I'm going to start running a game in there, and I'm going to invite other GMs to run games in there. And it's just going to be a great community. So it's going to be awesome. So I'll see you on the Discord. Yeah, heck yeah, Jason96. I'm going to share it next week. So just stick around, and I'm super pumped about that. And I regret that it didn't quite get there this week. I just wasn't quite ready for it. It literally got finished. Finished today. Still a little bit of testing needed to be done. I have someone helping me with it because I'm not a Discord pro, but we're getting there. We're getting there. It's very, very close. Twin Steel says, Hexblade Warlocks are awesome. One of my friends DM'd a Hexblade Paladin multiclass. Oh, that's metal. With the deal that he progressed levels based on how depressed what the PC was at level up minus sad equals Warlock happy equals Pally. That's so much fun. I love those things so much. How depressed he was. That's what you call flavor. That's what you call flavor. Jason96 says, I'll see you on Discord. Yeah, absolutely. Twin Steel says, looking forward to it, my man. Murik says, was looking for it all week. Lol. I know. I thank you so much for your patience. But next week is the week. It is the week. We're going to do it. On Monday, I plan to drop that link in the email and in the community tab if everything goes as planned, and I think it should, but Monday will be the day. And I plan to do hangouts on Tuesdays, and I plan to run a game on Friday. I actually don't want to run a game. I want to play in a game that someone else is going to run. If I can find someone who's willing to like run an online game on Fridays, but I will totes run it if there's nobody available, and it'll all be good. I'm very excited to get it rolling. But anyway, all right. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much for showing up, for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. This has been a great one. Twin Steel says, awesome. See you soon. You looking for DMs? No, 100% Twin Steel. When I drop that link and you jump in that Discord, if you're interested in that, just make an announcement. There's going to be like an entry. There's going to be like a room, like people like come into, it's called the Tavern. So just say, hey, I want to DM. I want to run a game, and I will hook you up. High key, no doubt. Jason96 says, this was great. Thanks for the live stream. Nakey77 says, forever DM problems. Yeah, it does. Forever DM problems. All right. Thank you all so much. I'm going to end this now. Thank you so much for showing up, and I'll see you awesome people on the next one.